Good afternoon. We're back with another Marvel Snap video, and today we're going to be going over the leaked patch notes. According to the Marvel Snap Reddit, the patch notes are out in Korea, and so we're going to be going over the changes and speculating on how this will affect the meta. So the first change we'll look at is a change to Arrow. Reportedly, she goes from 5 cost 8 power to 5 cost 7 power, a modest nerf. Well, when Arrow is a pain in the neck, she's not primarily a pain in the neck because she has 8 power. It's usually because of the ability, move all enemy cards played this turn to this location. This is a small nerf in my opinion. Does it affect her playability? Well, how often when you play Arrow and win are you winning because she's at 8 power instead of 7 power? How often is that making the difference? It can't be a very high percentage. So this hits her a little bit. I would speculate a 1% change to her win rate. This indicates to me that the developers believe only a small change is needed to bring her in line with their design philosophy for the card. She's still going to be a pain in the neck to play against and very good to play as one of your player cards. So this is a small nerf. An example of something from the past that was a big nerf. The Dinosaur used to be like a 3 cost 2 power card. I don't know if this significantly changes Arrow's place in the meta. Definitely a little less stronger, but I would guess not more than a 1% hit to her win rate. Maybe 1.5 to 2, something like that. That's my guess. Next up we have Leader. Similar change reported for him, goes from 6 cost 4 power to 6 cost 3 power. Once again, the power in this card is in the ability. Copy all cards your opponent played this turn but on your side. How often are you winning because Leader is at 4 power and not 3? Probably a similar nerf. He goes from, maybe takes a 1% win rate hit, maybe 1.5 to 2. This is another small nerf, a minor adjustment for the card. My guess is they're not wanting to take cards that people have paid tokens for because they're very strong and nerf them into the ground. That's what these nerfs to Arrow and Leader say to me. These are minor concerns. And I don't really think they'll affect how much people play. Now, if you're running a deck with both Arrow and Leader in them, and you've taken now a hit for 2 power to your deck overall, that's a bigger deal. I would say individually, Arrow and Leader getting hit is not such a big deal, but if they're being played a lot on the same deck, and you're taking a 1% hit to your win rate from Arrow and a 1% hit to your win rate from Leader, well, most decks aren't running a win rate of more than, 56, 54% or something like that. So if they each got hit by 1%, it doesn't seem like much. But margins are thin in Marvel Snap. Win rate margins are thin. And that is a big deal for decks that run both Arrow and Leader. I think that the good cards deck that just runs a lot of big cards, Arrow, Leader, Leech, etc., I think that is a hit to this deck. The combination of the nerfs to the 2 cards. Individually, still playable. Together, I think that deck drops down in the meta as a result of these nerfs. Next up we have Galactus. Reportedly goes from 6 cost 3 power to 6 cost 2 power. Doesn't really affect the Galactus deck at all. What the Galactus deck wants to do is destroy a bunch of cards and then play Death and America Chavez or Death and Null. And this doesn't hit either of those cards at all, and that's where the overwhelming majority of the power comes from. If you played Galactus and then Death and America Chavez, that you're going to be at 24 power at the lane. Dropping that from 24 to 23, how much does that affect the win rate? I would guess no more than, I don't know, 0.25% or something like that. This doesn't really hit Galactus. This is like a token nerf. I wouldn't say it hits Galactus really at all, and I would actually not object to Galactus being a 6-cost 0 power card. That nerf would... If I saw that nerf today, I would think, yeah, okay, that's appropriate, and the card is now probably balanced now, but at 6 cost 2 power, I think he's barely affected, if at all. Because the overwhelming power of the deck comes from Null and or Death America Chavez or something like that. Next up we have Nova, reportedly nerfed from 1 cost 2 power to 1 cost 1 power. So we're seeing a trend with the nerfs today with Leader, Arrow, Nova. These are cards that are good for their abilities and their power is being hit by 1. In decks that are not running many 1-drops, well, let's think about this. In decks that are playing Nova in order to buff him up as a 1-drop, this does hit him. But most of the time, when a deck is playing Nova, they're playing it to destroy him. And when they're playing it to destroy him, his power is irrelevant. They're playing it to destroy him for the buff to Carnage, the when this is destroyed, give your cards +1 power. I suppose it hits Venom a little bit. This is a very, very small nerf for this card in most decks. Now in decks that are playing Nova and don't destroy him very often, that are playing him for like Killmonger protection or something like that, I don't know. Well, this could hit those decks a little bit, but if your deck is playing Nova to destroy Nova, I wouldn't worry about this nerf really. It's an interesting nerf. In terms of how this will affect his win rate, that's hard to say. But I would guess it'll be similar to Galactus. Not much, if at all. Because it leaves his ability, which is the primary reason why Nova is played, it leaves his ability untouched. But in, an emergency situation where you haven't been able to destroy Nova, and maybe that 1 power makes a difference in that situation. So it's like if the deck doesn't work right, then he's a little worse. And so that would make the deck a little bit more swingy and a little bit less consistent. Decks that run Nova. Hits the Death Destruction deck a little bit, not much. But a little bit, makes it a little bit more swingy, gives it a little bit more variance in terms of how it performs. Small amount though. Next up we have a change to Drax. Unfortunately I own Drax. I say unfortunately because he's not one of the Pool 3 cards I was hoping to see early in my collection. But he is being changed from 4 cost 4 power to 4 cost 5 power, and his ability is being changed from, if your opponent played a card here this turn, +4 power to +3 power. So he gets a base of 1 more power. Ultimately, if you guess right on where your opponent's going to play a card, there's no difference. But if you guess wrong, he's slightly better than he used to be. This is a change that makes him a little less swingy and is a small buff to him on average. Interesting that he's buffed now considering Zabu just entered the game and Drax is being played more in Zabu decks. So this makes Drax a little bit better and the Zabu deck a little bit better. The Zabu deck didn't really need help from what I've seen. I still wouldn't look at this card much when choosing cards I'm going to play in my deck, except in specific builds. So I don't really think this changes the general playability of the card. If he was 4 cost 5 power and plus 4 power if your opponent played a card this turn, I wouldn't consider that an outrageous buff. I kind of wish that's what they had done, though I guess it does imbalance Zabu a little bit. But I wouldn't consider that outrageous. And I kind of wish that's what they had done with Drax. As it is, he remains, for me, meh. Next up we have Hazmat, reportedly buffed from 2 cost 1 power to 2 cost 2 power. Okay. I never really thought of Hazmat as a card needing a buff. Well, maybe they just want her to see more play. I guess that probably improves her win rate by a small amount. I don't think it changes the Hazmat deck's place in the meta too much. So I'm not really sure what the goal is here. Don't think it brings Hazmat into the meta. And I don't think Hazmat, this doesn't make it make sense to run Hazmat in other decks outside of the deck that's designed for Hazmat. So, I don't know. To me, this doesn't seem to have much of a point. They must have had some idea in mind. Maybe she just isn't seeing play very much and they wanted to change that. This is a curious one. This one came out of the blue when I saw that in the patch notes. The others all kind of made sense to me, but this one, that one doesn't really make sense. And I don't think it significantly changes that deck's place in the meta. Next up we have Black Cat, reportedly changed from 3 cost 6 power to 3 cost 7 power. That's actually a big deal. That is a big deal. That puts her over the 2-to-1 power to cost threshold into the range of Maximus. The downside is a big deal. If this is in your hand at the end of your turn, discard it. So it really only makes sense to run this in the Hela deck. But this does make her, in my opinion, a must include in the Hela deck if you have it, or an obvious inclusion in the Hela deck if you have Black Cat. And I like this buff for her. I was a fan of this card before the buff, and even more so after. Consider if you run just Black Cat and Hela in your deck, Hela's an automatic 6 cost 13 power card. Now, the downside of discarding a card is a big deal, and it really makes it more like a 6 cost 10 power card, which is meh. It buffs Morbius as well. It allows for a larger Hela play at the end at the cost of drawing a card early. Though if you draw it on turn 3 and play it right away, it's a 3 cost 7 power, which is phenomenal. This helps the card though, and this helps the Hela deck, so I like it because I like the Hela deck and I do think it needed a little bit of help. It's a lot of fun to play, but it did need a little bit of help, and so I'm happy to see that happen with the Black Cat buff. And I was a fan of the Black Cat card before, and so I'm happy about that nerf. Of the changes that have happened, Arrow and Leader I'm happy about, Black Cat I'm happy about, Galactus and Nova I'm pretty indifferent about, and Drax as well. Hazmat I'm confused, but the Black Cat I like, the Black Cat buff. Up next we have Nakia, buffed reportedly from 3 cost 1 power to 3 cost 2 power. That's a big change. That makes her much, much more playable. That makes her one of the best 3 drops in terms of plug and play cards. cards that don't require any comboing to make them good. It's not, of course, going to make it better than Silver Surfer or Patriot or whatever. Or even cards like Rogue situationally, certainly not Brood. But in terms of being plug and play, like providing 6 power for 3 cost in basically any deck, that's a big change. A big change. It'll be almost an auto-include card in Pool 2. Competes with other Pool 2 cards for best 3-drop in the game. Not going to compete significantly with Pool 3 cards for that title, but it is a very good plug-and-play card, and it's going to add functionality to a lot of decks that would like to add buffs to cards like Mr. Sinister, Brood. So this is going to change the meta. This is going to make Nakia played much, much more often. That's a significant change to her. And this is going to mean some new types of decks are going to move up the meta that we haven't seen as much up until now. Decks that would really benefit from buffing cards before they're played. Like Mr. Sinister, like Brood. What other cards would be good with that buff? Multiple man, certainly. This makes Nakia an auto-include in the multiple man deck. So that's an interesting change. I don't know if I like it or not yet. We'll see if it imbalances anything else. I do think that change, along with Arrow and Leader, will be the ones that change the meta the most. Next up we have Groot, reportedly buffed from 3 power to 3 cost 4 power, though he only gets plus 2 power from his ability now. A very similar change to Drax, and I would say very similar things about it, which is that I would not have objected if he was buffed from 3 power to 4 power and not touch his ability at all. As it is, I don't think this significantly changes Groot's playability. Maybe he sees play a little bit more often in Silver Surfer decks. Maybe Drax sees play more often in Zabu decks. But that's about it. Outside of that situation, I don't see this changing Groot too much for me. So that's all the changes, reportedly. There's also a change to the way collector's tokens work. I guess after you've collected all Series 3 cards, collector token payouts are set at 400. Now they will be anywhere from 2 to 600. So it introduces more variance there. The overall acquisition rate is the same. I don't know why they did that. And reportedly, for new players who want to get started right away, they're releasing a Pro Bundle available for one-time purchase only that includes 12,500 credits plus boosters to upgrade 8 common cards to Infinity. I would expect that that bundle will be quite expensive because that is a lot of value. If I had to guess at a bundle price, if this is priced anything less than $150 or so, it'll be a steal. Those credits are probably worth that. Well, no, let's see, $150. So currently, if we look at the gold prices, if you bought credits in the shop, it's 500 credits for 400 gold. That's a conversion rate of 1.25. So 12,500 credits would be worth 10,000 gold. 10,000 gold would be worth about 100 and what is that? I don't know, $120 give or take. $125. So forget what I said about $150. If this is priced around $100, it's a good deal. If this is priced at 125 or so, nah. Yeah. It's, we'll see what the pricing is. That's a lot of credits, though. So I do expect it to be an expensive bundle. New players who want to get started right away and who are willing to spend over $100 on the game. That's what this bundle will be for. And I guess that will... So it's a one-time purchase, so I assume everybody can buy it once, even if you're already in Pool 3. I suppose if you really hated the early Pool 3 grind and wanted to skip a portion of it, this would help with that. It's expensive, though. So that's all of the changes reported in the new patch notes, and thank you for watching.